Danielle Carter adjusted the rich sapphire dress that flowed gracefully down her frame, smoothing the fabric with practiced poise. Louvre Nord was nothing short of elegant, a place where chandeliers cast golden shadows against marble floors and the faint chime of cutlery sang like a soft symphony. Tonight wasn't just dinner. It was a milestone. After years of clawing her way up through mergers, boardroom politics, and executive indifference, Danielle had finally earned her place as director of global strategy at one of the top firms in New York. And tonight, she was going to celebrate that with no one but herself. Just her, a beautiful meal, and the silence of satisfaction. As she stepped into the restaurant's grand foyer, the scent of rosemary, buttered truffles, and seared filet danced through the air. Her heels echoed softly against the floor as she approached the host's stand. The young woman stationed there glanced up quickly with a rehearsed smile. "Good evening. Welcome to Louvre Nord. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes. It's under Danielle Carter." The hostess glanced down at the glowing tablet, tapped a few times, and then nodded. "Ah, yes. Party of one." Danielle nodded once, her smile composed. "That's right. This way, please." She was led to a small table tucked near a window, overlooking the shimmering skyline. The restaurant hummed with quiet laughter, murmured conversations, and the occasional burst of a wine cork. It was everything she had hoped, luxurious, hushed, exclusive. Danielle took her seat, her fingers brushing lightly over the linen napkin. She inhaled the ambience, warmth, prestige, success. This was her moment. And then a voice cut into the calm. "Can I help you?" The tone was clipped, almost irritated. Danielle glanced up. The waiter stood stiffly at her side. His name tag read David. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, and eyes that held a subtle sharpness. His uniform was neat, but his posture tense. Danielle offered a polite smile. "I'd like a glass of the house, red to start, please." David's expression barely shifted, but his response was pointed. "You sure? It's on the pricier side." Danielle paused. The implication was unmistakable, but she was practiced in diplomacy, even under pressure. "Yes," she said evenly. "I'm sure." With a short nod, David turned on his heel and left. Danielle sat a little straighter. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was having a bad day. But when the wine came moments later, he set it down with a hard clink that made the glass tremble. Danielle brought the rim to her lips, tasting the bold notes of oak and plum. She tried to let it wash away the tension. But David returned too soon. "Ready to order?" Same voice. Same lack of warmth. "Yes. I'll have the filet mignon, medium rare, with the roasted truffle potatoes." His brow lifted ever so slightly. "Medium rare?" he repeated, like it was foreign to him. "Yes," she answered, matching his gaze. "Is there a problem?" "No," he said, though it didn't sound like an answer. More like a dismissal. Danielle set her glass down and leaned back. She'd been through worse. Investors who doubted her, co-workers who called her aggressive behind her back. But this was different. It was quieter, slimier. She watched as David returned to the kitchen. The energy he left behind felt sticky, lingering. She closed her eyes for a second, willing herself back into focus. She wasn't going to let this ruin her night. But when the steak arrived, one look was enough to know he had. The filet was dry, the edges curled, and inside, gray all the way through. Not even a blush of pink. She looked up at him, his face unreadable. "This isn't what I ordered," she said calmly. David crossed his arms. "Looks fine to me." Nearby tables grew quieter. The subtle tilt of heads, the sideways glances, all told her people were paying attention, but pretending not to. Danielle folded her napkin, set it to the side of her plate, and met his gaze with steel. "I'd like to speak with the manager." David smirked. "Ma'am, we're very busy tonight. The manager doesn't have time for minor complaints." "Minor," Danielle repeated under her breath, like tasting something rotten. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and without raising her voice, held it just high enough for him to see the camera lens. "I'll wait," she said. That was the moment everything changed. David's eyes darted to the phone. His mouth twitched. Without another word, he turned sharply and disappeared. Danielle exhaled slowly. She had never been one to threaten, but she also wasn't someone to let disrespect slide. She sat still, composed, her posture regal, like every room she'd ever commanded in her life. And she waited, because she wasn't going anywhere. The moments dragged on, but Danielle Carter didn't flinch. She sat perfectly composed, wine glass in hand, fingers steady, eyes forward. She wasn't the kind to cause a scene, not because she couldn't, but because she had learned that power often came from stillness, not volume. The double doors to the kitchen finally swung open. The manager stepped out. Tall, mid-50s, tailored navy blazer over a starched white shirt. His gait was brisk, purposeful, as though he'd been summoned not just by a complaint, but by something more consequential. His name tag read Richard Lane. Behind him, a shadow followed. David, whose eyes now lacked their earlier smugness. Richard approached with professional calm. "Good evening, MS. Carter," he said smoothly. "I understand there's been a problem." Danielle didn't speak right away. Instead, she gestured elegantly toward the steak. Then she lifted her gaze, meeting his with calm expectation. He took one look at the plate, the meat clearly overcooked and unworthy of the restaurant standards, and frowned. His lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, he turned to David. "My office." "Now." David hesitated, just for a second, but then followed, eyes downcast, a hushed murmur rising through the nearby tables as they disappeared into the back. Danielle remained still. Around her, the buzz of the restaurant resumed, but not fully. Patrons whispered, casting occasional glances her way. Some held the familiar expression of upper-class discomfort, as if her presence had disturbed the unspoken etiquette of looking the other way. Others, they looked almost impressed. Danielle had been here before, in different forms, different places. Rooms where she was meant to shrink. Conversations where she was meant to be quiet. But this time, she had simply decided no. She took a sip of her wine. The boldness of the red reminded her of who she was, and who she'd become. Minutes passed. Then the kitchen doors opened again. But this time, it wasn't just Richard who returned. A woman walked beside him, older, poised, striking. She wore a deep navy dress that hugged her figure like it had been made just for her. Her silver streak hair was pulled into a soft bun. Her skin was warm brown, her expression both elegant and unwavering. She walked with the calm certainty of someone who never needed to prove herself. "MS. Carter," Richard began, "I'd like to introduce." "I can introduce myself," the woman interrupted gently, a hint of warmth in her smile. "I'm Evelyn Rousseau. I own this restaurant." Danielle's brows lifted slightly. She hadn't expected this. Not the owner, and certainly not her. "I hope you don't mind me sitting," Evelyn said, motioning toward the empty chair across from her. Danielle hesitated, then nodded. "Not at all." Evelyn sat down gracefully, folding her hands on the table. She paused, like someone who weighed every word carefully. "I heard what happened," she said at last, "and I want to speak with you personally." Danielle studied her carefully. "I appreciate that," she replied. "I assume David won't be serving anyone else tonight." Evelyn's expression didn't shift. "He won't be working here at all. As of tonight, he's terminated." Danielle wasn't surprised. She simply nodded. "He's been here a while." "Too long," Evelyn said quietly. Her voice carried weight. There was history behind it. "You've had issues with him before." Evelyn exhaled softly. "Many. Small things. Complaints that were subtle, easy to explain away. But no one ever stood their ground long enough for me to justify removing him. Until tonight." Danielle leaned back slightly, absorbing the moment. There was something in Evelyn's tone, something deeper than business. "I didn't come here to get someone fired," Danielle said, her voice calm. "I know," Evelyn replied. "But you didn't let it slide either. And that's why I wanted to thank you." Danielle frowned faintly. "Thank me?" Evelyn nodded. "For not shrinking. For not pretending it didn't matter. For showing me that silence is still a choice, and the wrong one." There was something sincere in her eyes, something personal. Danielle leaned forward slightly, curiosity taking hold. Did someone make you shrink once? A brief pause. Then Evelyn chuckled softly, the sound both knowing and sad. Many times, but not anymore. Before Danielle could respond, Richard cleared his throat gently. There's actually something else, he said, glancing at Evelyn for permission. Evelyn gave a patient nod. Go ahead. Richard turned to Danielle. Evelyn was in the process of selling the restaurant. He began, his tone cautious. Danielle blinked. Selling. Evelyn said, picking up smoothly. Until tonight. Danielle tilted her head. You changed your mind? No, Evelyn said. I changed who I'm selling it to. Danielle sat still, confused. I'm not following. Evelyn picked up the glass of water beside her, took a slow sip, and set it down with precision. I saw you tonight, she said. Not just how you handled what happened, but how you carried yourself. And I realized this restaurant shouldn't go to some corporation looking to add another notch in their portfolio. She paused. It should belong to someone who understands why this place matters. Danielle's breath caught. I'm offering it to you, Evelyn said plainly. The deed, the business, the future. If you want it, it's yours.